Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the October 1st, 2013 business meeting of the Washington County Board of Education. I'll call the meeting to order. We have a quorum of members present. To lead us today in the Pledge of Allegiance, I'd like to introduce Ethan Spears, a fifth grade student from Hancock Elementary School.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Stocks are rising as the markets appear to be taking a partial government shutdown in stride. This is NBC News Radio. New York police have at least one person in custody.
Thank you, everyone. Ethan, would you like to tell us a little about yourself, what you like to do, what you like in school, introduce any guests that you brought with you?
My name's Ethan Spears. I'm 10 years old and I go to Hancock Elementary School. I play baseball in Hancock for the Little League team. Here with me today is my mom, Tina Spears, and my grandmother, Patty Mills. My favorite subject in school would have to be math because I feel like that's the best subject. That's my best subject.
All right.
Dr. Hardy's tell you to
Yeah,
say that?
he's
Dr.
been
Hardy's tell you to
prompted.
say that?
Just so you know,
The
I try
last
to
two have
convince.
been math.
I try to convince all the kids to say reading, but he said it's math. So.
Thank you, Ethan.
Well, thank you, and thank you to your mother, and thank you to your grandmother for bringing you out here. It's great to have you here to start our meeting.
Thank you.
Have a great day today, Ethan.
Any board members have any guests that they'd like to introduce today? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moves, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reitnauer. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Brightman. Is there any discussion or amendments to the agenda? If not, all those in favor of approving the agenda? Is there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0 and the student member concurs. Approval of the minutes.
Mr. President, I'd like to move for the adoption of minutes from a closed session that the board held on Tuesday, September the 17th, 2013, and on the same date, minutes from the business meeting. Move for approval.
Motion by Mr. Bailey. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Are there any amendments to the minutes or corrections? Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the minutes? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0. Next, we have public comment. We have one individual who's signed up to speak, Mr. Russell Williams. Mr. Williams, it's nice to welcome you back to the school board.
Thank you.
I know you're familiar with our procedures, so I won't read them, but we look forward to hearing from you, and the floor is yours.
You have a timing device, Mr. Williams?
What? Yes, I do.
So do I.
Policy BAA and Exhibit BAAE. In part, Policy BAA states, the members of the elected Board of Education of Washington County shall conduct an annual self-appraisal prior to October 1st of each year. The annual appraisal does not preclude the board from evaluating itself as frequently as it may deem necessary. Policy BAA and Exhibits BAAE together are not seeking individual self-evaluation, but speak to the board members collectively evaluating the board's ability to most effectively perform its mission. Board members should not claim that they are evaluated by voters every 4 years. Election has little to do with an individual's day-to-day interactions with their fellow board members. In any case, Exhibit BAAE is not asking for individual members to evaluate themselves. Exhibit BAAE is asking board members to evaluate the whole board's functioning. The policy BAA asks board members to do a yearly evaluation of the sitting elected board as a unit. The board as a whole is required to and should evaluate its performance at least once a year. If a particular board is functioning very well, it is good to establish the tradition of an evaluative procedure. If a particular board is extremely dysfunctional, then the yearly evaluation becomes even more crucial. Policy BAA is in part implemented by having all board members fill out BAA-E. All of the 31 questions on Exhibit BAA-E seem to be relevant and important. Examples of things being evaluated are number 16. Board members display a spirit of compromise when impasses arise and arrive at a near unanimous consensus. 17. Board members vote their conscience but support majority decisions. 19. Board members speak loudly and clearly enough so everyone present can hear them, including the audience. 30. There's a rational relationship between how long the board spends on an agenda item and its importance. Board members may self-evaluate, but the board as an entity cannot self-evaluate without participation of all board members together in the evaluation. There are 7 elected board members. If you 7 board members have an aversion to sitting and evaluating as a group, your ability to collectively and effectively achieve the goals of your mission statement, then what hope is there of the mission statement goals being approached in the most expeditious manner? As a former board member, I sat through a number of board evaluations, and they certainly did not terrify me, and I thought they were useful and helpful experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Are there any board members that wish to offer a brief response, comment?
I'd just like to say thank you for your opinion.
I'm sorry?
Thank you for your opinion. Thank you.
Oh, I'm full of opinions, they'll tell you that.
Anybody else? All right, we'll move on to old business. The first item is consideration of the second reading and adoption of policy ACE, service animals in schools.
Good afternoon. The first reading of this new proposed policy entitled Service Animals was presented to the Board of Education at its public business meeting conducted on September 3rd. Since the first reading, the policy was posted and members of the community were requested to provide comments. We did not receive any comments. At this time, the Policy Committee is requesting the Board of Education's approval of the second reading of this policy.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Is there a motion to approve the second reading of policy ACE?
Mr. President, I move for approval of the second reading of policy ACE, service animals in school.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. President.
Second by Mr. Ridenhour. Are there any comments or discussion on the policy? Ms. Brighton?
Mr. Trotta, just a minor correction. I do believe we did receive a public comment by way of Tim Rowland's column about the attitude of miniature horses, and I want to be sure he feels we've taken those comments under advisement. And I would add on that I think this is another example of a federal mandate without funding to help with that attitude adjustment of miniature horses. So I'd like to enter that into record. Thank you.
Thank you.
When Mr. Rowland goes on vacation, I may give the Herald Mail your name.
There you
do
go.
guest columns?
I just couldn't help myself.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes, I had a question about the definitions used in Section 2. Are those definitions that come from the Americans with Disabilities Act, or are they adaptations of those definitions?
It's a combination of looking at Howard County's policy on this particular matter and also the federal regulations, and we that's the source of that material.
Thank you.
Is there any other comments or discussion? If not, the question's on the approval of policy ACE. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs. Next item under old business is consideration of the second reading to rescind policy BAA and exhibit BAA-E. Mr. Trout?
Yes, thank you. On September 3rd, the first reading with regard to this matter was conducted. The policy committee recommended that the policy and exhibit be rescinded. The Board of Education adopted that first reading, but they also requested the policy committee to give the matter further consideration. At the policy committee's public work session conducted on September 17th, the chair of the policy committee offered new proposed language. As a result of that meeting, the policy committee has the following three recommendations. First, that policy BAA be rescinded, that exhibit BAA-E be rescinded, that a new policy be adopted. The new policy would authorize the board as a whole to conduct a self-improvement session when it deems it appropriate. The new policy also sets forth the purpose of such sessions. After the policy committee meeting, the recommendations were posted and members of the public were invited to provide comments. We have not received any comments. A majority of the members of the policy committee are requesting that the three recommendations be adopted by the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Is there a motion to approve the second read of policy BAA and the rescission of exhibit BAA-E?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
Among Americans who don't know whether to look to their leaders and their government to
Is there a second?
pace on not only civility and no name calling, but getting down to business.
If there's no second, then the motion fails for lack of a second.
An open-ended question is asked like this.
Next item on the agenda is the second reading and adoption of revised policy IKD.
Good afternoon. On September 3rd, 2013, the Board of Education approved the first reading of the proposed changes to policy IKD. The Board of Education also approved a motion that a student's grade point average should be calculated at the end of the final marking period. The motion also provided that changes to this policy would become effective as of the 2014-2015 school year. The Board of Education then referred its proposed changes to the Policy Committee for further study. The proposed changes and the motion adopted by the Board were posted, and members of the public were invited to provide comments. No comments have been received. The Policy Committee reviewed this policy during its most recent public work session conducted on September 19, 2013. The Policy Committee modified the policy by incorporating the changes recommended by the Board of Education and by including a beginning paragraph that is modeled after a policy adopted by the South Harrison Community School District located in Indiana. The Policy Committee also recommended that a sentence be added that allows each school the flexibility to designate additional graduation speakers. The Policy Committee is recommending the adoption of the proposed changes to this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Marco. Is there a motion to approve the second read and adoption of revised policy IKD?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Hirschman. Is there any comments or any discussion? Mrs. Brightman?
The discussion, my discussion is by way of a motion to amend. And I'd like to just sort of start at the top and put that motion together as I go so we can cover several different items here. So if we're looking at the red paragraph at the top, the motion would be to delete the first sentence, starting with the second sentence. Everything remains the same, going down to the middle of the second sentence where it talks to establish a process. I would insert between A and process default. So it would read to establish a default process. Stop the rest of that at the end of graduating class of a Washington County public school, period. And insert, furthermore, it is recognized that unique and non-traditional schools be allowed to develop their own school-based graduation traditions with student and staff collaboration. One other addition to the motion, if you go down to number 2, strike all before high school and just say high school graduation ceremonies. That's the motion in the entirety.
Is there a second for the motion?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Mrs. Brightman, you have the right to speak first to your
The concern, thank you. The reason I'm offering this is I do feel that first sentence, the Board of Education believes that it is our responsibility to develop talent rather than to select it, really speaks to a vision and mission and goals that we really are just in the throes of developing right now. And I think it gets ahead of what the vision and mission and goals may turn out to be. Adding the word default to the process basically gives all of our comprehensive high schools the opportunity to continue either with this policy, which I think is important, and it's something that they're all doing. It's their best practice right now. But it does recognize what I think of as non-traditional, unique schools having their own ability to chart how they would like to see their graduation ceremonies be held. And I give some examples as the Family Center, the Evening High School, the Summer High School, BISFA, Tech High, a possible virtual high school. We have a lot of different styles and types of high school in our school family, and I think we need to recognize them and give them an opportunity to do their own, set their own tradition. So that's why I offered the motion.
And just so I'm clear, the language about the particular schools is part of the motion, or you're offering those now as just examples of?
Examples of. I don't want to limit us, but I think whether you feel that we need to define what a unique and non-traditional school is, then maybe we would need to offer those samples.
I just want to be sure that if the motion were to pass,
That
if
staff-
a future board in 5, 7, or 10 years looked at the policy, that they would have clarity on what it means too.
And we may be adding more non-traditional schools.
Right. I understand.
I'm happy to add that list, I just don't want it to be exclusive
Okay.
of another. But thank you for that.
Is there further discussion? Mrs. Fisher?
I would just ask Mrs. Brightman to read, I think, starting with the word however, that would be the third sentence. Is that where you made significant changes?
No, actually, the beginning of the first sentence.
Well, I know you dropped the first sentence.
The beginning of the second, where it says the term valedictorian. That
Okay.
that stays in.
All right, but I'm concerned about the way you worded it about the different schools. Would you reread it?
Did you get it, Tony?
Oh, okay. That, again, I inserted default between A and process, and then it ends at the end of Washington County Public School, period. It stops, so we would delete the last sentence and instead insert. Furthermore, it is recognized that unique and non-traditional schools be allowed to develop their own school-based graduation traditions with student and staff collaboration.
Does that to me is not totally clear. Does that mean then that not every school would have the valedictorian and salutatorian? In other words, we go back to what has been happening.
one.
What I see is a unique and non-traditional school.
I
Some
understand
of the
that.
examples that I
I
gave
understand those.
would decide on their own how that plays out.
So in other words, Tech High could continue doing it as they have been doing it.
If staff and
Right,
students in
if they agree.
collaboration decide to.
I just wanted to be perfectly clear on that. Thank you.
Are there, Mrs. Harshman?
As a member of the policy committee, as we drew this up, it was with the understanding that support was in the community for a unification of the method for valedictorian and salutatorian being chosen and speaking at the graduation. So this would negate all of that then, is what you're saying. Is that correct? I want to be sure I understand that. It would be up to the individual schools to decide how to do valedictorian and salutatorian and run the graduation.
Not the comprehensive schools, but the unique and non-traditional schools.
So if you chose to leave a school and go into a non-traditional school, your grades would not necessarily determine that you got to speak at graduation, which is what was happening at Tech.
Correct.
That caused the problems. Okay.
It would
I
be a
just-
process
I just
determined
wanted
by
to-
that particular school.
I just wanted to be sure what I was voting against, because I think when we talk to the SGA and to other people in the community, that what we got was they wanted it standardized, so I just wanted to be sure. Okay, thank you.
Just one additional point for clarification in paragraph 2, it says all high school graduation ceremonies will have, and you've struck all.
With the concern, if we say all and then distinguish unique, do they work against each other?
Well, what if instead of all, it said comprehensive high school graduation ceremonies?
Perfect. And then that's very specific.
So that makes it clear what I think you're intending for
Exactly.
unique versus comprehensive.
Yes.
Are there other comments or discussion? Mr. Grunendijk?
I would just like to say that as student representative to the Board of Education, I will be voting against this amendment as long as it says the part about non-traditional schools having a different standard for their graduation ceremonies. I mean, I don't think that they're that different that they don't... I mean, I'm going to go to a graduation at the end of the year, even though I go to a non-traditional school. My grade point average is still computed based on the grades that I've earned over the 4 years that I've spent in high school. And the fact that I go to a non-traditional school doesn't change that. And I'm working very hard to try and achieve that highest honor of valedictorian. Maybe I'll achieve it, maybe I won't. But I would like to know at the end of the year that if I do achieve that at the end of the year, that the Board of Education supports the opportunity for me to speak that I've earned over those 4 years. Also,
go ahead.
I was talking, we had our county SGA meeting at Tech High 2 weeks ago now, and Dr. Hardings was there and Mr. Ridenour was there, and we spoke to the students, and we received general consent from the entire assembly on basically what's in front of us right now, maybe slightly different, but the idea that all high schools across the county should have a valedictorian and salutatorian that are allowed to speak at their graduation. And also, at that point, Tech High did not have an officially elected student government, so of course we were not completely fully represented there. Now Tech High does have an elected student government, and I was speaking with their president, and she told me that she was going to start a petition around the school to get signatures in support of the policy as it is in front of us today. And then she found out that the principal had already changed it to valedictorian and salutatorian. So then she stopped. But I also spoke to quite a few students, dozens I would say, in Tech High, and all of them were in support of valedictorian and salutatorian speaking at graduation.
So I would just say that then the amendment addresses a best practice that just occurred at Tech High, where the student and staff collaboratively decided, and they decided then to go with a val-sal. So it doesn't preclude a val-sal, it just makes it more of a school-based collaborative decision. And that appears to be, if what you're saying, that appears to be what has happened.
Mrs. Harshman?
In the past, that has not been collaborative. It has been principal directed. It was instituted by the principal at will with no consideration to the students. So I don't know how that would pan out. I think a county policy is by far the best choice.
Other comments? Ms. Ryder?
President, excuse me. I think Mrs. Brightman's motion, has merit, because I think we forget that there are, we take a look at our high schools and we think of the 7 high schools, 8 high schools that we have, and 2 of which are somewhat non-traditional, that being BISFA and the other being Tech High. BISFA is more comprehensive than Tech High, because BISFA you could start there as a freshman and finish as a senior. Tech High, you start there as a junior and finish senior year, and you bring in, as Dr. Wilcox mentioned in the last meeting or earlier, that different opportunities in those first 2 years. Now, that being said, I want to go to the other non-traditional high schools, evening high school, summer school, and others. How do we deal with that? It's never been a part of the question. It's never been a part of the discussion. What do we do in those particular non-traditional schools? We are now telling them that you're going to speak. Somebody's going to speak. I don't see a way out. You go from top to bottom until you find a speaker. The way the motion reads, or the way the policy reads, if the valedictorian doesn't want to do it, then the next person does it. If they don't want to do it, the next person does it. And you keep going down using grade point average until you've got 2 speakers. I think that this gives those non-traditional schools a way to work around that. So I think this particular motion has some merit, so I will support it. And interestingly, when I was there, and you're right, you're absolutely right, you didn't have the 2 Tech High, they hadn't been elected, but there were 2 Tech High reps there, interestingly, that thought their tradition was okay. They were willing to I believe that the one thing that they liked as an alternative or as a compromise was the statement about you could have more than 2 speakers if so desired. But those 2 individuals were kind of, we like what we're doing. So you may well be right. I'm not disputing what you're telling me. The majority of those students, and as you said, they've already made up their minds that they're going to go with it. They're not doing it, so it's up to them.
And I think as well that the principal had formed that idea based on the impression that we were going to pass this policy as is in this meeting, so he might as well change it now. But just speaking to what you said about other non-traditional high schools, I don't think we have a high school that doesn't give grades. And I think that each of those high schools, you earn the grade that you get. At least that's the idea. And each of those grades adds up in the end to whether or not you're going to be valedictorian or salutatorian or where you are in that ranking. And I don't think that's different at any of the schools that we have in this county. So why should the way that they're selected to speak at graduation be different at any of the schools in our county?
I'll chime in that I do think there's something different about some. I've been to just about all the graduation ceremonies from all the schools in the county. There's certainly something different at the Marshall Street ceremony. Now, as written, the policy seems to say that we're going to require speakers at Marshall Street graduation or students at the summer school graduation or the evening high school graduation. I tend to think that those schools and those school communities should be able to decide for themselves how they're going to decide who those graduation speakers are. What's inspiring to me about the evening high school graduation or the summer school graduation are that those are students who might not have otherwise graduated, but took the initiative for whatever reason. There's a variety of reasons. But through the dedication of our staff and the commitment of those kids to make the decision that, yes, I'm going to go finish, there's something more inspiring to me, and I'm just speaking for myself, at those ceremonies, something more inspiring than grade point average. It's something about perseverance, something about commitment, something about not giving up, something about not overcoming obstacles. And boy, if those schools wanted to decide that that's how they wanted to pick their speaker, I just would not want to foreclose that possibility through a policy that we're going to approve today. I basically agree that at the comprehensive high schools, and I would count Barbara Ingram as a comprehensive high school, if you take all your academic classes there, 9 through 12, you happen to take more arts classes there than you would at one of the other high schools, but I consider it a comprehensive high school. But for some of the other schools, where kids are in unique circumstances and we work hard as a community to try, as a school system, to do what we can to help those students get to graduation, I don't like writing a policy that forces them to do something that may not work for them. So I'll support the amendment.
Well, I don't see this as forcing anybody to do anything, because I believe that it says it shall go to the, and this is the possibility of speaking, shall go to the next person. Of course, if no one wants to speak, then an alternative plan would be in effect, but that would be true of any school. So I don't see where the uniqueness is about how to select someone other than based on valedictorian and salutatorian grades. And many of the schools, while they are unique in the way they work, are still graded, are still expected to perform at a certain level, and are expected to do the best that they can. And I think that's what gives them the opportunity to do it. As far as evening high school, all of the students in evening high school most likely have faced some kind of challenge or a difficulty in getting their classes during the school year, the regular school year. So then you have to say, well, this person has had a worse time getting his grades, or this person had a worse time getting to school than someone else, and I don't know how you can determine that. So I will definitely be voting against the amendment and for the policy, the way it stood.
Are there any other comments?
Go ahead.
I just want to mention, I just had Mr. Akers check because I received some email earlier. There is not a change to the planned graduation process at Tech High for this year. It may be coming in forthcoming in out years, but right now, Mr. Jeff Stauffer has met with, I think, the top 6 students and their families for this year. I just want to make sure the board knew.
Mr. Bailey?
We've incorporated the word comprehensive into the policy, and I'm wondering if, for the general public, if we need to define what is a comprehensive high school. If it doesn't have interscholastic athletics, do you consider it a comprehensive high school? If it doesn't have a drama club or organization, do you consider it a comprehensive high school? I just fear that we're trying to define what a high school is, and we do have different types. if we might not need to define what we mean by comprehensive.
I think that's something that we could do in an exhibit. Ask as if Jackie needs any more work. But it could be included in the definition of a comprehensive high school and non-traditional.
Ms. Fisher?
Would it settle this and not need an exhibit if we just say a 4-year high school instead of comprehensive?
But Tech High and Vista are 4-year high schools, are they not?
This is,
Tech High is
isn't.
not.
Tech is not.
Tech is not?
It's 2 years.
2 years.
Oh, okay, they're doing 2 years. I see what you're saying.
And all the other, so far, all the other non-traditionals are not 4-year schools, right? Well, Marshall Street.
Yeah, 2 years at high school.
I thought our purpose in addressing this was to make it standard throughout the county because of the purpose or the incident where we had questions about how Tech High conducted their graduation. So in my mind as one of the policy committee members, I was looking for a way, as I think the policy committee was, to make it standard throughout the county. So if one student moved from one school to the next and was valedictorian at the first school, he or she had the opportunity to be valedictorian at the second school, depending, of course, upon his or her grades. So it was like a standardization, since we are Washington County Public Schools and not little individual entities, to keep as much of the policies for all the county as opposed to, well, everyone except, or everybody does this except those people, or with the exception of so-and-so, everybody else is included. That just taints the policy and makes it extremely difficult for anybody to understand. So, I mean, that's what we set out to do with the policy. I don't know if I misinterpreted it or not, but...
Are there any other comments before we vote on the amendment? Does everybody understand what the amendment says and what we're voting on? Okay, the question is on Mrs. Brightman's amendment. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion passes 4-3, with the student member concurring with the minority. We return now to the original policy. Are there any other questions, comments, or amendments on the original policy as amended? Ms. Williams?
If I remember correctly, we asked that guidance counselors be polled or spoken with as to the doability, if there is such a word, for the final marking period grade to be used.
We spoke with both principals and high school guidance counselors. The principals felt logistically they could definitely do it. The guidance counselors had some of the same concerns that were voiced in the policy committee in terms of the length of time in which they would have to identify the valedictorian, the different programs. In conversation with the principals, they felt still logistically, even some of the concerns that the guidance counselors expressed, that it is very doable.
Mrs. Harshman?
Did we not also ask teachers who were responsible for the grades? I think we asked you to ask teachers and guidance counselors because principals are not responsible for the grades or averaging them. So principals really don't have a dog in this fight. It's the teachers and the guidance counselors who will be overworked, because I spoke to guidance counselors myself who voiced just what you said, which was it's almost an impossibility to try to gather up those at the last minute when they're trying to get kids in college and all the grades together and so on. And teachers have said the same thing with trying to make sure that everybody's passing and has all the work in, et cetera, and then to stop and make sure that you are grading just those who are in the running for valedictorian and salutatorian would be a whole separate issue and a lot more work. So that's what I got from them. I don't know if you talked to any of the teachers or not.
We did not survey teachers, only counselors and principals, Mrs. Sargent.
You did not survey?
We did not survey the teachers.
Teachers.
My recollection is that we were asked to really survey the principals because they had a meeting coming up that
Yes.
same week as a policy
But I
committee and
specifically
council.
asked in the meeting for guidance counselors and senior teachers, the ones who teach seniors, because those are the ones who are responsible for those grades. And as a senior teacher, I know exactly what it takes to do them.
Are there any other comments or questions on the policy as amended?
I have a question, if I may.
Mrs. Williams, sure.
I'm just wondering about the intent of C in Section 2. Each school has the right to designate additional graduation speakers as determined by the principal and/or his or her designee. Are we talking student speakers there? Are we talking paid speakers? You know, what is the intent of that?
If I can respond to that, maybe we should add student speakers, but because some schools have, for instance, the president of the senior class give a welcome speech, or it was also meant, I think, to cover the situation at Tech High if they wanted someone in addition to the valedictorian, salutatorian, to still give them a chance to have a competition if they want to have it, but it still recognized those two top students. And I think that's why it was added, but it might have been an oversight that we did not put the word student in there.
Well, I would say that at Tech High, Mr. Weberly speaks and awards a scholarship in memory of his son who was killed on the USS Cole. So there are sometimes, in practice, and I think for good reason, non-student speakers who also speak. So I think this would sort of address that. I mean, if you've been to Tech's graduation, Mr. Weberly doing that's very moving.
And I will add that at Boonesboro High School, this past graduation, they had a guest speaker, Tony Mendez.
I just wanted to be clear on what the intent of that addition was. Thank you.
Are there any other comments? If not, the question is on approval of the policy as amended. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes 4-3, and the student member concurs with the majority. Thank you. Next item is item number 1 under new business, consent agenda. Ms. Freeman?
Good afternoon, Dr. Harding.
Good afternoon.
Dr. Wilcox and members of the board. 7 items are on the consent agenda this afternoon. 4 are bids and 3 are procurement actions on orders. I'm going to go through the list as you have done in the past and allow for questions at the end of my presentation. The first bid on the agenda is for liquid propane gas. We solicited and received bids for providing and delivering liquid propane gas for the 2013-2014 heating season. We have 14 schools who utilize liquid propane gas for heating. Rockland Woods uses it as their primary heating source. We received bids and are recommending award to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Thompson Gas of Boonesboro, Maryland. They offered us the lowest markup over wholesale of 30 cents per gallon. And we are pleased with that bid result and believe this contract will result in some savings to the school system. The second bid on the agenda is for contracted snow removal services. The board awarded last year 4 vendors, East Coast Landscaping, to perform snow removal services for Boonesboro, Clear Spring, Hancock, and Northern area schools. Mann's Construction of Hancock for the Hancock area schools. Smithsburg Rental Service for Smithsburg area schools. And Advantage Landscape of Williamsport for the Williamsport area schools. This recommendation is to continue to utilize those companies at the same unit rates as was bid and award last year. We've had good service from those companies for the past year. The third bid, this is an RFP for the design and build of a kitchen ventilation system for the administrative center. We had two proposals. We're recommending the lowest cost proposal. The contract would provide a design and a new ventilation system, which would take into account the new kitchen equipment that the board previously approved to be ordered, and the ventilation to be properly sized and operationally efficient, also compliant with fire prevention and safety standards. The recommended bidder is MTS Equipment of Winchester, Virginia, in the lump sum total of $52,916 based upon the preliminary design that they submitted with their bid. We are recommending an optional price for some stainless steel field wrapper for two of the vent hoods, which is a little enhancement to the vent hoods in the design. The fourth bid is to construct some renovations to the administrative center. The interior renovations include finish, fire safety improvements, accessibility, plumbing, electric, data, fire alarm, and mechanical work on all of the floors within the facility. Not a lot of work on the third floor, but the other floors. There's quite a bit of work here to be done. We have a substantial completion date of January 15th, 2014, and unit prices for contingencies for things such as drywall partitions, ceiling panels, electrical outlets, etc., should those changes be needed in the final design. This contract is recommended to be awarded to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Building Systems Incorporated, in the total amount of $1,789,200. That total includes alternate 3. Alternate 3 is for some glass on the lower level wing of the facility. The orders that are on consent this afternoon, we have a purchase order to Control Systems Incorporated. We did request and obtain quotes for the purchase of variable air volume boxes and related accessories. These are part of the heating, ventilation, and air system in the administrative center. They provide new thermostats and controllers and will allow the building to be networked for managing comfort controls within the facility. We processed a requisition on September 25th to Control Systems, purchase order KK4436, at a total of $115,925.90. CSI is currently under contract with the school system to help with our maintenance of our electronic, computerized, automated temperature control systems throughout the school system. A requisition 165218 is to Hartford Computer Group for desktop computers. This order utilizes the State of Maryland hardware contract and is in the amount of $45,400 for 100 desktop computers, and these are part of the routine computer replacement program. Two requisitions are under consent this afternoon to Apple Computers for the purchase of 96 10-packs of Apple iPads. These iPads will be purchased along with several other items with funds that were recently awarded to the school system as part of the iWrite Writing Across Curriculum grant project. And there is a informational report in with the packet for you to take a look at. That said, that concludes the procurement action items for today's meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Mr. President.
Is there a second?
There's a second.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Are there any questions?
Mr. Freeman, you mentioned that under number 4 that Building System Incorporated was a Hagerstown or Washington County business. Control System Incorporated, number 5. Are they local?
Yes, Hagerstown as well.
Mr. President, would it be appropriate to read more detailed information into the original motion? Would staff prefer that, or would that be helpful in any way?
I would be happy to assist with that if you'd like me to repeat.
Sure. Why don't you go ahead and, if you're prepared to, Mrs. Brightman, why don't you read them in? That way it'll be very clear to everybody.
If that's
what
all
the
right. I
board's
know
action
it's
is.
usually not
Okay.
appropriate for the second to read it in, if that's all right, Mr. Bailey.
Fine.
Propane fuel, motion's already been made, sorry. Propane fuel bid 2014-07, awarded to Thompson Gas. Snow removal services renewal bid 2013-10, awarded to East Coast Landscaping, Mann's Construction, Smithsburg Rental Service, and Advantage Landscape. RFP 2014-17 awarded to MTS Equipment. Construct renovation, bid 2014-13 awarded to Building Systems, Inc. Purchase order KK 4436 awarded to Control Systems, Inc. Requisition 165218 awarded to Hartford Computer Group, Inc. And finally, requisition 165259 and 165597 awarded to Apple, Inc. Did I catch all of that? Thank you.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions or comments on the consent agenda? If not, the question is on the approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Item 2 under new business is comprehensive maintenance plan for fiscal year 2015.
Good afternoon, President Hardy, this is Dr. Wilcox, members of the board. We're here today seeking your approval of the comprehensive maintenance plan for Washington County Public Schools. As you may be aware, this is a sister document to our educational master plan that the board approved back in early June, and an additional document to the CIP that the board approved back in September. So at this time, we're requesting your approval of the comprehensive maintenance plan. Comprehensive maintenance plan is required by the state to be submitted every year to ensure that the investment of the state dollars towards our capital improvement projects to our school facilities are being well used and the facilities are being maintained. And we can go ahead and entertain any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. Is there a motion to approve the comprehensive maintenance plan for fiscal year 2015?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Brighton. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Questions and comments on the maintenance plan? Mrs. Brighton.
Page 2 of the report, under initiatives, it's mentioned that an athletic facilities inventory was created to establish benchmarks for best practices and determine deficiencies at all high schools. Did I miss that report? I looked for it. Is it
One of the
forthcoming?
challenges that Dr. Wilcox gave staff about a year ago was to do a full inventory of all our athletic facilities. So it took us a number of months. We kind of filled in with a variety of other projects as we had time. So pictures were taken of all the facilities, concession stands, storage facilities, condition of tracks, those types of things. And a large notebook was put together. I don't think we presented it to the board. We actually haven't completed the final piece of that, which is the needs assessment, prioritizing a list of how we're going to approach it. But we do now have a complete inventory of all athletic facilities, the age of equipment, what's on our property, who it belongs to, those types of things.
And that wouldn't need to be in this report. That's more of a local initiative rather than a statewide initiative. Question on, gosh, there's not a page number. Okay. We're under Chapter 3, and it's the facility assessment spreadsheet. Under Western Heights, it's at a overall rating of 81%. Does that include the work we just completed, or would that go on the next evaluation?
That'll go on the next year. Because this is a sister document, we pulled forward the other information from the other documents. That's correct.
And help me understand again why secondary schools do not qualify for QZAB money. It looks like everyone here is listed as not eligible. Is that a secondary school issue?
Secondary schools qualify for QZAB money. We used QZAB money to replace the roof at Tech High a couple of years ago.
A couple, okay.
It does require a certain percentage of free and reduced lunch, I believe. I'm thinking off the top of my head, so sometimes some high schools don't meet that.
The entire list was no, so I was curious why. I thought maybe secondary couldn't qualify for QZAB.
That's a
Just
error.
happened to be all no this time, or?
That was an error, actually.
Ah, okay. And on the page 26, the 77 relocatable buildings, affectionately known as learning cottages. My understanding is that there's going to be an air quality standard coming forward.
That's
So
correct.
we will add that to our spreadsheet for future. I notice we don't put portables in.
The portables right now, the new air quality standard is for portables purchased after 2007. So we
it's
don't
not
have any,
the-
our last purchase was 2005, 2006 range, I think, as we were adding all-day K.
Okay, all right, so
So
that
we
would.
certainly, if we add any additional portables, we'll have to be in that scheme.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Bailey?
On the facilities assessment chart, I don't think it has a page number to it. But as you study that, one area that jumps out is the deficiency in the accessibility for ADA compliance.
Part of our
How do we plan to address that?
Part of our backlog list, if you look at the summary in Chapter 5, you'll see our deferred maintenance list of approximately $38 million, and you'll see almost $12 million, somewhere between $11 and $12 million of ADA deficiencies. Staff works on those steadily throughout the year, things that they can do on their own. As we work on new projects, we try to address ADA compliance, and we try to put money towards ADA issues every year. So Mark, I don't know if you have additional comments, but it's a substantial list of items that we need to address.
Yeah, it's glaring, it jumps right out on the page as you look at those.
We're addressing them all the time, and as we complete any type of renovation, like the area at Western Heights, for instance, all of those doors and all of the signage and everything in that Western Heights renovation were brought up to ADA standards. So as we renovate, we make a conscious effort to address the ADA issues that are already called out in a report that we had completed in, I believe, 2009.
So probably any school that was not built in 2000 would have ADA compliance issues.
Yes, that's correct. And also, if we have a handicapped student at a certain school that doesn't have a ramp or needs a ramp or needs a special accommodation for restrooms or changing room, we'll take care of those on an as-needed basis.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments on the comprehensive maintenance plan? I look forward to seeing the numbers on page 60 regarding deferred maintenance on the administration center go way down next year. I know you're on the case, Mr. Mills, and you are as well, Mr. Michael. Any other comments? If not, then the question's on the motion to approve the comprehensive maintenance plan. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs. Thank you. Item 3 under new business is consideration of the first reading of policy BHD, board member compensation and expenses.
Welcome back, Dr. Marco. Mr. Trotta?
Board of Education policy BHD addresses the compensation paid to board members and the reimbursement of expenses that may be incurred by board members. The policy committee determined that it was necessary to update this policy by making it clear that the compensation paid to board members is determined by state law. Although the past practice has been to reimburse board members according to the same procedures that all school system employees must follow, this was not specifically stated in this policy. The policy committee is recommending that this policy be amended to make it clear that board members are to be reimbursed for expenses at the same rates and using the same procedures as all Washington County Public School employees. The policy committee is recommending the approval of the first reading of the proposed changes to this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marco. Is there a motion to approve the first reading of policy BHD?
Mr. President, I move for approval of the first reading of policy BHD, Board of Education, member compensation and expenses.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Harshman. Are there any comments or discussion on the proposed policy? Mr. Ridenour?
Mr. President, I would like to offer an amendment. I'll pass it out so that, and Tony, if you would, so that everybody can look at it, because it is extensive. My amendment is to place in between the first sentence and the second the following. The yearly budgeted amount for board member expenses shall be divided equally among elected Board of Education members to be utilized for each individual member's incurred expenses. An individual member may, solely at his or her own discretion, direct that all or any portion of his or her allocation be made available to reimburse the incurred expenses of another member. Any member whose incurred expenses exceeds the sum of their budgeted amount, and any amount made available to him or her by another member shall have sole responsibility to reimburse the difference to WCPS. Any portion of a member's allocation that is not spent or encumbered by the end of the fiscal year will be returned to the general fund.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Mr. Ridenour, you have the right to speak first to your
Thank
amendment.
you, Mr. President. This really is just a similar idea that came to me from the manner in which classroom allocation works or allotments work for teachers. Each teacher gets a certain allotment for classroom funds, and if you need more, you can get a colleague to help you out. Otherwise, you're on your own. And I felt that it's necessary for us to stay within our budgeted amount, and maybe this would be a way to make certain that we do that.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenour. Are there other comments or questions? Mrs. Fisher?
Just a minor correction. In line 6, between some and there, should be of.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you, Jackie.
Are there other comments? Mrs. Brightman?
Most of this, I believe was in best practice or use back when I first came on the board in '07, where we had a set budget line item for reimbursement, and it was divided equally among the 7 members. And I think the only new twist, even though I believe it may have occurred informally, would be the being able to negotiate with another member to reach a certain amount. So that, I think that would help. Some of us work, some of us are retired, some can attend meetings more frequently, and so it may be helpful to be able to aggregate some of those. I think it's probably a practice that should be put in policy.
Are there other comments?
Can you
Mrs.
tell me
Williams?
what the current budgeted amount is for expenses?
I believe it's $5,500.
Thank you.
But that's a amount that the board controls. It'd be
Right.
the-
But it's been that for this past year, but has it increased, decreased, remained constant for a period of time?
I think when I first came on the board, it was 7,000 maybe.
When
And now
I
it's
came on, it was
5,500.
14, basically giving each member $2,000. And then I think it was decreased at one point when the economy went south. I think we as a board collectively decided to lower that total. And you said 55 at this point?
Is what it is, yes.
Total.
Is that, do you have anything else, Mrs. Williams, before I move on?
Not on the amendment. I
Okay.
have some other questions.
Mrs. Harshman?
Can you tell me how much has been spent from that fund at this time?
From this year, I wouldn't know, but if you give me a second, I can find out how much we spent last year. There it is. Last year, we spent a total of $6,411 with $5,500 budget.
6,411?
Yes.
Thank you.
Also, I'm not sure that you can equate this to teacher classroom allotment because every teacher needs something from the classroom, for the classroom. However, every board member should need something from professional development, and I know that there are very few of us who attend those, so consequently, we may run over a budget, but if it's $2,000 per member, I think that would probably cover just about anything that we did. Mrs. Williams and I have attended several conferences and have made it a point to double up on cabs, even housing, and so on in order to keep prices down, but or costs down. But it would seem wasteful to just let it sit and do nothing when it is meant for board professional development for those who want to do that, just because they happen to attend more than other people do. So I'm not sure that divvying it out equally is in best interest of board professional development. So I won't be voting for the amendment.
Thank you, Mrs. Harshman. Are there other comments? I'll just say from in my time in the chair as the one who signs the reimbursement forms when people go to meetings, that it would be helpful to have some structure around that for me, because as people travel, I don't really believe that it's my role as the president to tell an individual member you can or can't go to a particular meeting, or you can or can't go to a conference, or you can or can't go to a workshop in Annapolis. I just don't think that's my role. We are all equals here. It's just my responsibility to sign the form. But it puts me in a position of then signing reimbursement forms that may put us over our budgeted amount. And I'm not sure how to square that. I think the amendment and the practice would certainly help me to understand where we are with our travel budget and to manage it appropriately. It certainly would bring a measure of accountability to what we spend for our professional development activities. Mrs. Williams?
Just a thought. Mrs. Harshman mentioned that we had attended, she and I both attended the National School Board Conference in San Diego, and we will be attending the MABE conference. I believe there is a policy that states that board members are encouraged to attend those two policies. So my thought would be in making the budget that we allocate sufficient funds to make it possible for the 7 board members to at least have enough allocated individually to allow them attendance should they desire to go to those conferences. I don't know what other expenses. I've claimed nothing other than those, the one that I've already attended and the one I'll be leaving to go to today. So I don't know what other expenses are being claimed. So I would hope that we could at least allocate enough funds for us to partake of professional development, especially since we're encouraged to do so through policy.
Mrs. Fisher?
I believe I would support this amendment to divide the funds up simply because, let's say, maybe 3 board members decide earlier in the year to attend events that actually put us over our budgeted amount, and then maybe later in the, pardon me, later in the year, a different board member has an opportunity to attend a workshop or some helpful event, and the money's already spent, then that person loses out or is going to be responsible for taking us over our budget. So for that reason, I think I would vote for this amendment to divide the allotment among the 7 board members.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Are there other comments?
I will not speak to it now. I think probably the time to speak to it is when we do deal with our budget. I think you have to take it to not only to the low end, which we're talking about $5,500, but to the extreme. If you put together what it costs to go to the National School Board Association conference in San Diego and to Ocean City for MABE and others, if you take the top amount, which will probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,000 to $4,000 for that, and multiply that by 7, you're talking about raising your budget from $5,500 to close to $30,000. That I'm going to have a problem with. I think that at some point, we're not Congress. We can't just say we'll close the government, but I'm going to continue to get paid. I think at some point you say, okay, there are certain things that I really think will benefit me, and there are things that I'd like to do. I don't think they're mutually, I don't think they're things that necessarily go together. So we'll wait until that comes up, but at this point in time, I would have a lot of problems with that.
Well, I think you're right, and I think it goes to Mrs. Williams' point. We could certainly increase the allocation, and we could certainly do that during budget season, which is when the time would be to do that. And that'd be a good discussion, I think, for the 7 of us to have.
We have a work session on the budget.
Mrs. Harshman?
I do think that in some instances, because many of the people who run for the board are not working and are on fixed incomes, that this could prevent professional development in a way that some people may like to take part. So I think we need to keep that in mind too, because it's not easy to decide which activity you're going to go to. Now, like Mrs. Williams said, the only ones that she or I have gone to and asked to be reimbursed were the MABE conferences and the national conference. Everything else, which includes a leadership organization that we get leadership points for in Annapolis, has never been turned in, nor would it be. And that's also a possibility for people to turn in, but I don't think anyone else, maybe Mrs. Brightman, goes to those too. So it's just different activities that different people take part in, but I think that you will cut out a lot of people from professional development if there is no way of assisting them with the costs. As we know, this is not a high-paying job, so most people have something else, some other job that is high paying unless you happen to be retired and on a fixed income. So I think we need to keep that in mind. And I don't think that everyone takes part in any of this, so I think we need to set a budget, but I think that it needs to be something that would allow people to take part in the activities that they want to, as opposed to just as long as their money didn't run out. The cost of the conferences that we've gone to, what we were reimbursed for did not even come close to what was spent. So there were only certain things that could be turned in and so on. And as you know, when you travel, there's much difference in housing and in everything else that you do, including dinners and lunches and breakfasts and so on. So that often hasn't been covered to the extent that they should be. So I do think we need to look at the budget and allow people to take part in the conferences who are willing to.
Ms. Fisher.
I just want to say there are many other types of professional development available out there through MABE as well as other places that don't require the expenses of, let's say, the national convention.
Are there any other comments on the amendment? If not, the question is on Mr. Ridenhour's amendment to the policy. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 6-1, and the student member concurs with the majority. We return now to the question of the policy as amended. Is there any further discussion or other amendments? Any other discussion?
I have a
Mrs.
question.
Williams?
The policy refers to accompanying regulations, and I don't have those, so it would be helpful to me to have those in conjunction with the policy. So I'm not prepared to vote on this policy without knowing what those regulations say.
This is first read, correct?
This is first read, and the regulations are...
I imagine we could get the regulations, Mr. Trotta, to the board members before second read.
They're in the policy manual, are they not?
Yeah, they're
Mr.
on board docs.
Yeah, I'm
You've
looking
got
at
your
them on
computer
board
in front of
docs
you
right now. They're exciting.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or discussion? Mrs. Bright?
Just a question, Mr. Trott, in the first of BHD, the first sentence where it says Board of Education members will be compensated as provided by law and reimbursed. Is reimbursement in the state law? Is this, I know we're considered state officials. Our policy is just referencing local public school system employees. They're also considered state employees. Are we in alignment with state law as far as reimbursement?
To my knowledge, the Maryland law only addresses compensation to be paid to Board of Education members and not reimbursement for expenses that they may incur. The approach we've taken here is that the cost, the reimbursable costs are covered under board policy.
Is this at the same level as our state delegates get reimbursed, as our university employees, any other state agencies? Do you know if we're above, below, aligned?
We actually have done a survey of that. The state of Maryland will allow for breakfast $8. We are at $10. For lunch, the state is at $10. We are at $15.
For lunch?
Yes, and for dinner, the state is at $24, and we are at $30. But the difference between the local, our approach that we take and the state does, is that the state, and I gave those materials, I believe, to Mrs. Williams. The state has, for each geographic area, they have a different allowance. So if you're in a high-cost metropolitan area, then the rates that I just provided for the state...
That's just the base, and
that's
then
the
they
basic
do the...
rate. But if you're in Boston or San Diego, some of the New York City, some of the high-cost areas in the country, They actually have a listing of major cities and what they will reimburse. So they actually, at that point, exceed what our local board allows for compensation.
And we don't have that type of enhancement at the local level?
We do not.
Any further discussion on the policy? If not, all those in favor of the approval of the first read of policy BHD? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 6-1 and the student member concurs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Thank you, Dr. Marco. Item number 4 under new business is consideration of the appointment of a representative to the Washington County Advisory School Design Review Committee.
Thank you.
Dr. Wilcox, it's got your name under the...
It does. Just one second. Mr. Michaels, if you'll come up, but this is a recommendation that we are making to the School Design Review Committee, and we are recommending our Director of Elementary Programs, Mr. Matt Semler, for the board's consideration in this appointment.
Is there a motion to approve Mr. Semler to appoint Mr. Semler to the Washington County Advisory School Design Review Committee?
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the appointment? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you, Mr. Michaels.
I'm going to ask my colleagues if there is a motion to amend the agenda to move the independent auditor's report to be the next item on the agenda. We have a number of folks who have come to participate in that discussion, and I believe everybody's here who needs to be here. Is that right, Mr. Sal? So if we could move that to next, we might save everybody some time and save the people who are giving of their time to us a few minutes in their day. Is there a motion to make that change to the agenda?
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion passes 7-0 and the student member concurs. So, next is independent auditor's report for the 2013 financial statements.
Mr. South, if you'll make sure that your guests are properly introduced. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, Mr. Superintendent, members of the board. It is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Tim Peters here this afternoon. Mr. Peters will present the results of the fiscal 2013 annual audit of the financial statements and the A133 single audit. Mr. Peters is an associate member of the accounting firm of Smith Elliott Kearns & Company. Also with me this afternoon is Mr. Jeff Yingling. Jeff is the chairman of the board's audit committee. I think all of the board members know Jeff. And Mr. David Brandenburg, our director of accounting. First of all, I'd like to say that the finance staff sincerely appreciated working with Smith Elliott again this year. As always, their staff was extremely professional and pleasant to work with throughout the entire audit process. Also, I would be remiss if I did not thank the members of our audit committee for their service. These gentlemen are accounting and finance professionals who carve time out of their busy schedules each year at this time to provide direction to the audit, review its results, and offer suggestions when they deem it necessary. This group is chaired by Mr. Yingling, who I just introduced. For many years, Jeff had a solo accounting practice here in Washington County. The other members of the committee are Mr. Al Martin, the former CFO of the City of Hagerstown, Mr. Ray Gray, the CFO of Meritus Health System, and Mr. Ron Schiffler, the CFO of Cumberland Valley Recycling. I would also like at this time to express my appreciation to Mr. Brandenburg, our Director of Accounting, and to Ms. Stacy Kajowski and Ms. Renee Milburn, our two accountants, for the hard work and the long hours that they put in, not only during the audit period, but also during the rest of the year. The clean audit opinions that the board receives and enjoys every year is evidence of the quality work that these individuals do on a daily basis. That brings me to the audited financial statements that you have in front of you. I want to spend just a minute or two talking about them before I turn the discussion over to our guests. For folks who don't work with them on a routine basis, governmental financial statements can be complicated documents. They can be complicated documents even for those of us that do work with them on a daily basis. First of all, they're reported using 3 different bases of accounting. Some funds utilize full accrual accounting, which results in statements that look similar to those of the private sector. Other funds are reported using modified accrual basis, which results in statements that are unique to the governmental arena. And finally, the current expense fund must be presented on a budgetary basis in the RSI, or Required Supplementary Information section of the statements. The statements are also reported in 2 distinct different ways, government-wide and fund by fund. To complicate matters, the accounting basis for the government-wide statements is not always consistent with that of the individual funds. All that being said, I would recommend that any person interested in these financial statements focus on the management discussion and analysis, or MD&A. This section can be found on pages 3 through 14 of the document and provides details of how all the statements interrelate to each other. In addition to providing a basic understanding of how the governmental financial statements are reported, the MD&A will also present an executive summary of our fiscal 2013 results. It's important to note that in accordance with governmental auditing standards, the MD&A is not audited. However, the senior accounting staff built this discussion upon the audited statements. So you can rely on the data that is presented there to be in accordance with audited material. All that being said, at this time I'm going to turn the discussion over to Mr. Peters to provide you with the independent auditor's report. Then Mr. Yingling will provide you with the audit committee's reaction to the report. And finally, Mr. Brandenburg will give you an overview of the results of fiscal 2013 operations from management's point of view. Gentlemen?
Thank you. Good afternoon. The results of the audit are summarized on the 3 pages following the table of contents in your copy of the financial report. And to summarize what the opinions say, basically what it states is that the financial statements are management's responsibility. They have the responsibility of preparing them and making sure that they are fairly stated in all material respects. My responsibility and our firm's responsibility as your auditors is to provide an opinion on those financial statements as to whether or not they are fairly stated. And the way that we do that is by gathering audit evidence, which is typically the results of various procedures that we perform to substantiate balances and amounts in those statements. We also perform tests to make sure that the disclosures are accurate and not misleading. In doing so, we follow a variety of auditing standards. In addition to the generally accepted auditing standards, we also follow government auditing standards. So in our opinion, which is described in the first 3 pages, we feel that the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects. And in addition, we have provided a clean opinion on the organization's compliance with major federal award programs. We also are issuing a report in accordance with government auditing standards. Under those standards, we're required to report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance with laws and other matters. And in that report, we are stating that in our procedures during our audit, we found no material weaknesses over the board's financial reporting system. Turn it over to David.
On behalf of the Audit Committee, I'd like to thank Smith Elliott Kearns and Company for the job they've done. They've been our auditors for a number of years and continue to do really, really good work. And I think that the staff, and I'm beginning to feel like a broken record on this because every year I congratulate the staff, but I don't think many people in the area realize how lucky we are to have the quality of staff that is here at the Board of Education and for Washington County Public Schools. They continue to it continues to be a tribute to their ongoing efforts and their professionalism, the results, to come up with results of the audits the way they have. And this is not only Smith Elliott Kearns, but state audits as well. So I think they're to be very much congratulated. And really, the audit committee extends our congratulations to the board and the accounting staff for a job well done.
I'll take a few minutes and kind of walk through a few pages of the statements that I want to bring some matter to your attention. For one thing, as Mr. South mentioned, pages 4 through 15 is the management's discussion and analysis. That's designed to give you a good overview of the financial statements and some significant highlights that happen. There's some highlights on page 4. It's kind of the Cliff's Notes approach to the statements. It outlines the purposes of the different statements and the different phases of accounting and so forth. On page 9, you'll see there kind of a condensed and comparative report on our changes in net position from operating results. And I wanted to just point out there that our revenue was fairly flat, almost exactly what it was the prior year, and our spending is down. And our spending is down in areas of maintenance of plant and in fixed charges or employee benefits. The employee benefits includes the state contribution to the teachers system. And the overall contribution did drop about $2 million this year. Also, our revenue, you'll see there, it talks about how much each one is a percentage of our total. The local funding is down $4.4 million this year and represents 29.8% of our total revenues, which is down from 31.2% last year and about 44% 11 years ago. On page 10, there's some pie charts if you prefer percentages to numbers, and that hasn't changed too much over the years. We had some higher federal funding during the ARA years. Our employee benefits portion of that pie has increased over the years a little bit. I think that used to be closer to 20 or 22. And then page 12 begins an overview of our school system's funds. And the biggest change there from last year was the $6.6 million transfer that we used to acquire the Downsville Pike and to fund a portion of the Bester Elementary replacement school. Pages 16 and 17 are the government-wide statements, and that is kind of the most business type of our statements. The page 17 is kind of an unusual looking, it's called the statement of activities, and it's really designed to be an income statement, but it starts with expenses rather than starting with revenues. Then it subtracts certain revenues that are restricted or designed for a particular purpose, and then it shows how much of the net expenses are covered by general revenues. Pages 18 through 27 are our fund statements. And if you go to page 23, I want to bring that one to your attention. That has a good look at our self-insurance fund and our food services fund. You can get a good idea of the results of operations from that. Very positive across all of our funds, very positive results this year. Page 28 through 46 are the notes. And there's a lot of detail in there, a lot of required disclosures that's dictated by governmental and other accounting standards. And then page 47 is probably the statement that we're most familiar with because we talk about the unrestricted operating budget. And this shows the original budget, amended budget that we bring to you quarterly adjustments, and then how that stacks up against the actual results of operations for the year. And page 50, there's a reconciliation there between our budgetary basis revenues and expenses and the GAAP basis numbers, the general accepted accounting principles numbers that we present in the fund statements. And page 53, these are the numbers that we'll be reporting to the Maryland State Department of Education as our spending in the current expense fund, unrestricted and restricted. It reflects $16.6 million of grant spending this year, and that's fairly consistent with prior years also. And then pages 55 through 65 is the single audit, and 64 is kind of a good overview of the summary of the findings and status of our audit opinions and so forth, and some of the programs that were identified as major programs for testing under the Single Audit Act. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to take a stab at it.
Thank you, gentlemen. Are there any questions or comments on the audit report? Mrs. Brightman?
I promise not to ask all those questions. I'm going to run through it pretty quickly. But on page 15, where it talks about this financial report is designed to provide the citizens and taxpayers of Washington County and the creditors, parents, and employees of the school system with a general overview of the school system's finances. And staff could probably answer this. Will this report be online, available online?
Yes, it will. As soon as the board, as this is reported to the board, it will be given to our webmaster to put on the web.
Thank you. And just a couple, general, page 26, when we talk about the agency funds, we are talking about the principal's funds at each of the schools, and a lot of that is ticket sales, cash, events, and we all know about cash. It's one of those interesting commodities. What safeguards do we have in place? And I understand that the auditors do a sampling of schools of the agency funds. I assume that still happened again this year.
Yes, it does. The school system has a process in place where the internal auditor does an examination or a review at each of the sites. What we do as the external auditor is we look at the work that is done by the internal auditor, and we will select schools based on the results of the internal audits to perform our own additional tests at those school sites.
Do you look at the controls in place as stated by the internal auditor?
Yes, we look at the controls that are in place, as well as pulling samples of ticket sales, expenditures, to look for supporting documentation.
Sequential numbering and
Correct.
that sort of thing. All right. Just out of curiosity, I'm on page 31 now. In the past, it appears that library books and textbooks have always been considered capital assets and they're expensed at the time of purchase. Since we're doing many more devices, iPads, laptops, instead of textbooks, how exactly are those going to be considered? Would those be expensed? I know an iPad has a life expectancy of, I don't know, but not very long, because devices are changing frequently. How would we handle all of these devices we're bringing into the system?
They're expensed for purposes of our capital asset reporting because of the dollar amount, because they're less than $1,000 a piece. However, they are loaded with software that tracks their location, and we can trace them that way. If one were to disappear or something like that, we can find it that way with the tracking software.
Okay, so they're held in inventory. They're considered on inventory or capital asset, or
They're not considered capital assets, and we don't have any listing of them in accounting. I believe technology tracks them through this software and
through the software itself,
Yes.
rather.
Technology does have an inventory.
Okay. On page 33, my colleagues, I'm sure, will have some fun at my expense on this one, but at last meeting, we talked about the budget calendar, and we had a back and forth about, and I'm looking at note 2, 4, and 5 at the bottom of the page. There was a discussion about whether we submit a proposed operating budget or a final operating budget to the county commissioners in March. I see, and we decided to strike the word proposed, and yet it's used here. And then number 5, which I actually take a little more exception to, it says after approval or adjustment by the county commissioners. My understanding is the county commissioners just sort of do a thumbs up or down. I didn't know they had a line item ability to make adjustments to the budget. just the amount they give us, but they can't set our priorities for us. I just want to be sure, I'm a little concerned about the verbiage there.
During the process, there is the ability to ask for more than maintenance of effort. And so the county commissioners could adjust that request by any amount down to the required maintenance of effort, in which case, if we had a proposed budget that was based on a higher amount, we would have to come back and adjust our budget in June.
We would adjust, but the county commissioners, they just tell us how much money we get. And we adjust to that dollar amount.
That's how it's worked in Washington County, yes.
2 nurse issues, 34 and 50. There seems to be a reference on 34, it's number 6 under note 2. It states that number 6, the cost of school health nurses paid by the Washington County Health Department on behalf of the school system. They're no longer paying us. Nothing runs through them. And that's been over a year, I believe. Hasn't it been?
It was just this past
One
year.
fiscal, this is the first fiscal year.
And we are presenting comparative information in the management's discussion and analysis. So that wording can be...
It just mentions it on that page and on 50 under reconciliation of the budgetary basis, note 1. It mentions again that the school nurses are paid on behalf of the school system. And again, I'm a little sensitive to that maybe, but if that's an accounting necessity, maybe I could be convinced, but we paid for that ourselves.
That was a reconciliation in the prior year, but it did not come into play this year. But like I say, we do present comparative information in MD&A. We can remove that wording from the report next year.
So it would, okay, but it needs to be in here this year.
It needs to be in here this year because, as Mr. Brandenburg said, we're comparing this year's information to last year's.
I know I'm getting down in the weeds. Bear with me just a minute. This is sort of out of curiosity. On page 35, it talks about our investments and that we are not allowed, state law does not allow a school system to have or hold any international investment vehicles. I know, as a matter of fact, that the state retirement system and pension invest in international vehicles all the time. Has that been updated? We indeed cannot locally invest internationally, even though the state invests our retirement and pensions internationally?
I believe that's correct.
No surprise.
I am. I should say I'm a little annoyed by that we're limited as to how we can. And page 39, it's talking about long-term liabilities, note 8. Now, I understand where it talks about the interest rates on capital lease obligations, that would be BISFA, as well as, and I believe that would be the 4.5% that we're paying on the debt service. What in the world are we paying 12% on? And I looked further, would that be copiers?
Copiers. There were several different copier leases, and they have different interest rates, and the highest one is 12%.
Or can we refine, it seems like that's a huge amount of interest on a...
We will be going out for bid on copiers in the very near future.
Thank you.
Some of these
That's
leases
the right answer.
Some of these leases are 3 to 5 years old, copier leases. So rates were higher back then,
But we wouldn't,
that was
we couldn't have gone in and refinanced them, or would there have been a penalty for refinancing to a lower rate?
My guess would be yes.
Okay. Okay, I'm coming down to the wire here, that may have been it. Question on the grants. I know when we talk about, there's not a page number. It's the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. 59, I lied, there is a page number. How do we handle, do you look at the internal controls as far as the expenditure of grants, federal grants?
we look at the internal control over compliance with the grant requirements, which oftentimes does get into controls over expenditures. And again, the only ones that we will be looking at are the major federal award programs. So on page 59, for example, the grant programs that have the asterisk all the way out to the left of the program name, those would be the programs that we tested, or that we audited.
For controls.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments on the audit? I'd just like to join those who've said it already and thank Smith Elliott Kearns for, I think it's every year that I've been on the board that Smith Elliott Kearns has conducted our audit. We appreciate your working with us, and it's been very beneficial, certainly for me, to know both Tim and Mike Manspeaker and some of the other folks there, not just as professionals but as friends, to help me understand things about our budget that are, if you're not an accountant, you may not know. So thank you to the audit committee. I know you all give your time, and having attended some of the closeout audit committee meetings when you conduct the audit, it's clear how we benefit from the professionalism that those members on the committee bring to that discussion. Those are conversations that we as non-accountants can't have. So thank you and your colleagues for that commitment and service, really, to Washington County Public Schools. And finally, to the finance staff and Dr. Wilcox, as somebody's pointed out, this is what gives the board and, in fact, our constituents, the people who pay the bills for what we do, confidence that when we say this is how we're spending our money, it is indeed how we're spending our money. That's not to say that we're making good decisions or that we shouldn't spend it in a different way, but at least the public should have the confidence to know that when we say that management tells the board and the public this is how we're managing our money, they can have confidence that they're correct. And that's great for any citizen, taxpayer, voter, or constituent stakeholder of the school system to know. So thank you to Dr. Wilcox and the staff for making that so.
Thank you.
And I would say we're spending it correctly, thank you.
I agree, but some may not.
They would be wrong.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the superintendent's report.
Let me move forward here. The one thing I would like to point out today before we have our guest join us and talk to us about some results that we have is that recently the school board was awarded a really kind of a nice honor, and that was that members of our own employee groups, as well as community members, looked at the school district and said it was a great place to work. And while it wasn't a scientifically controlled study, it was kind of a nice accolade to hear people say that the organization that you work at and work with some fine professionals gets some recognition in the community. These are days when there's a lot of challenges placed upon our teaching staff in particular, our administrators under levels of pressure that they've never really, I think, experienced before either. And yet, the community sees fit to say it's a great place to work. So we're going to hear some more reasons why it's a great place to learn. And we'll move forward with that. Mr. Akers.
Thank you. President Hardings, members of the board, Dr. Wilcox, we're here to report on some test results. We're going to start with the advanced placement and IB scores.
The AP, or Advanced Placement Tests, are offered through the College Board, and credits can be granted at colleges. This is based on what score the student gets, how high the score is. A passing score would be considered 3 and above. Washington County Public Schools pays half of the testing fee. For last year, the testing fee was $89, and Washington County Public Schools paid the student was responsible for $44 of that. And MSDE also offers waivers for students who are in need. So they're able to take the advanced placement test at no cost.
This first slide, you can see, shows the participation and performance levels year by year from 2007 up until last year. You can see that we had the second highest number of takers of exams and the highest number of passing scores. Making sure, checking with our testing and coordinator to make sure I get that right. But obviously, there was a little bit of a slip in just the total number, but the pass rate actually went up.
When we look at the different schools and how many AP or IB exams are taking, you'll notice that North High looks very large, but that's because they take both AP and IB exams. 4 schools have increased the number of exams from 2012. That would be BISPA, Clear Spring, South High, and Washington County Technical High School. All of those increased. A number of them decreased, but only slightly. So we still have good participation pretty much across the board at our high schools.
Okay, this next slide shows the percentage of passing scores. And that is, of course, by school.
And again, you see consistency in the rates of passing scores at high schools. Sometimes they go up, sometimes they go down, but relatively consistent in terms of our pass rates. What I would like you to draw your attention to is this. This is a breakdown of the different scores. So when we compare 2012 to 2013, you can see that the number of 1s and 2s, which would be considered not passing, have decreased, both of them. And the number of increasing scores in 3s increased, 4s increased, and 5s increased. So our students are being very successful, not only just in passing, but in achieving the highest scores.
Okay, this slide is IB only. The dip in takers, I think, was explained to you when we did our IB presentation, in that a course that used to do semesterized, and so it was completed in 1 year, is now stretched out over a 2-year period. And so those students who would have normally taken that test won't be taking it until this year. So that's why there's a dip in the number there.
When we look at this slide, this is the number of different test takers for both AP and IB. So this would include students who took just AP, just IB, and then also AP and IB. What you will see with this is that we have decreased the number that are taking both, but we have increased the number of students that are just taking IB. So it seems that we have students who are focusing on the IB program at North High. This is the second highest number of students taking IB or AP since 2007. So again, I think it's a slight dip, but we're definitely on the upward trend.
Before we move on to SAT, are there any questions?
Not questions, but a comment that I want to make for the board. So several things that are taking place behind the scenes. Number one, we are looking at the number of kids who are taking courses and the number of kids who then are becoming successful on the exam administration. It's no longer enough for us to simply say we've increased the number of takers. That's a laudable goal, and we will continue to try to increase the number of takers. But we are very interested in the success of the students. One of the things that we have begun to do is to then look at not just the students who are taking the classes, but the teachers who are teaching the classes, and what are their success rates with individual groups of kids. 1 year doesn't make a trend, but we certainly want to look at several years of student takers and how many kids are coming from certain classrooms and what's the likelihood of their scores. So we are trying to do some item analysis that will help us make better decisions about not only who teaches our classes, but what students are sitting in those classrooms, and then how are they actually demonstrating the knowledge that they've gained. So we just want the board to know that that is going on right now behind the scenes.
Mrs. Harshman?
Do we have any information on the state and national percentages of test passers and takers and so on?
Yes,
And if so-
we get reports, district summaries, and including in that is Maryland, United States, and global. There's 34 tests offered. We can get the report for usually just the tests that our students take. So we do look at how we compare to all of those numbers.
Can we see those then?
I can give you this. It might be better to give you any more user-friendly. It's
Okay.
not,
Okay.
it's not something that, you look at each test individually. To look at all 34 at once is a lot to just look at and give you one slide. So we do examine that because we do want to see how we're doing, not only across the nation, but with Maryland as well. So we do look at that.
Yeah, I'd like to see that then when you can.
Sure.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? I will sort of, my question was going to be essentially what Dr. Wilcox just said, which is, it really doesn't give me heartburn that we may have a few fewer takers or people enrolled if the number of students who are being successful on them continues to go up. I agree that it's important that we expose students to college-level rigor, and just because they don't take the test or just because they didn't score a 3 doesn't mean it's not beneficial for them to be in that classroom. I think that's true to an extent, but at some point I think we have to really make sure that we've got, as Dr. Wilcox said, the right kids in the right classrooms with the right teachers, and the increasing percent of students who are being successful on the AP exam, to me, indicates that we're moving in that direction, and I think that's a great benefit to our kids. It's going to save them money when they go to college. It probably reflects more rigor in each of the classrooms that they're individually in. So I just want to thank the instructional staff and Dr. Wilcox for the obvious conscious effort that went into making that so. It's very encouraging to me.
And I'll just say that the number of students scoring a 1 and scoring a 2 going down is, and those students are now scoring, the ones who were scoring 1s are scoring 2s, and the ones who were scoring 2s are scoring 3s. The fact that it's moved in that direction has been from, a very direct effort. As soon as I think Dr. Wilcox arrived here and looked at our data, that was, I think, one of the first things that jumped off the page at him that he asked us to address, and I think we're seeing some progress in that area.
That's great. Mrs. Williams?
Well, I noticed too, looking at the chart, AP and IB exams taken by the school, that two high schools, one with 61 fewer students, 61 fewer students, and the other with 127 fewer students, and yet their pass rates went higher and are indeed the highest. So I was just wondering what that looked like at the school in terms of conversation that was had with those students. Were they discouraged from sitting for the exam, or were they given the option and just decided that they weren't going to sit for the exam? How did that play out with that number of
about
students?
the difference between the number of students enrolled and the number of students
Well, that's
taking
that's
the
what
test?
I'm guessing when I see a decline in the number of students at those two high schools. That
Yeah,
it
I
makes
think there
me-
were some tightening up of the requirements to get into AP classes at some schools where it had gotten a little more liberal than maybe it should have been. But then I don't think any of our teachers discourage students from taking the test.
So it's just fewer kids enrolled in AP classes and not students being discouraged from sitting for the exam.
One of the things we saw when we did some of the initial analysis was there were some kids being asked to take an AP psychology class, for example, who were reading at the 8th grade level. That made no sense at all to us. So we did say to some of those students, you're not prepared for this at this time. You need to really develop your reading skills if you're going to take a course that is very dependent upon your ability to read, interpret data. So I think, at some high schools, there were some kids that were said, let's try something else for you.
Do any other questions or comments?
Okay, we'll move on to the SAT results for 2013 school year. Just as a quick reminder to others who might be listening, the SAT is used as a college admission test and to determine scholarship eligibility. It includes critical reading, writing, and math. Most students take the SAT during their junior or senior year of high school. In 2013, the SAT was administered 7 times.
This first slide is our student participation. This is for the class of 13, so this would be students who were graduating last year. This includes all the tests that they took, no matter when they took the exam, so it's the full cohort. This is the second highest number of students who took the SAT here at Washington County Public Schools since 2007, and it's the third highest percentage of test takers. And at this point, the state has not yet released the number of diplomas, so we don't have a state number for 2013. But that will be populated as soon as it is released. We're at 53.7% of our students taking the SAT.
Okay, this next slide shows our critical reading scores as compared to other schools, both nationally and within the state. The average score for Washington County Public Schools students was slightly higher than the average score of Maryland Public School students and public school students nationwide.
This next slide is the math scores for the SAT. We stayed even with what we had last year, but we are 18 points higher than Maryland Public School students, 8 points higher than students in national public schools.
Next, we have the writing score. Washington County Public Schools score is above public school average in Maryland and the nation, again. This score shows our composite score. We dropped by 1 point. We're still above the Maryland Public Schools and national average scores.
Now, what's important with this is College Board defines 1550 as a score that a student would have a better than average probability that they would maintain a B- GPA in college, so they would term that as a student who is college or career ready. 3 of our schools had averages above 1550, and you can see that our score is at 1488 is getting, for an average score, is very close to that 1550.
Do you know if this average is an average based on a one-time take, or is it an average of like the super score for kids?
This is the last take.
So it's the last take.
It's not the best take. It could be the best take, but it is the last take.
So
it's
what board members and community might want to know is that as young people take the SAT test multiple times, SAT will aggregate up their best scores, which is called a super score, and that's what most colleges or universities use for entry. So let's just say that you take the math exam twice. The first time you get a 560, but the next time you get a 710. They'll use the 710 score for the admission process to college. The same would be true with reading, language arts, and writing. It's just important for you to know that, because you'll hear many kids talking about what their SAT score is, and that doesn't mean it's at the one setting. They're talking about the super score, which is the combination of scores.
This last slide is the score distribution, and I've been getting a lot of requests from the high schools for this, so I thought it would be something that the board would be interested in. This shows the distribution of scores. This is for all 866 students that took the test. And what you can see in this, I've broken it down into different score ranges, and the reason it goes only to 490, for an example, is because there is no 499. It goes by increments of 10. So I wanted you to see where our students are scoring, and you can see that most of our students are scoring in the 4 to 490 range when we look at the number of, that's the last take. So that equates to, for an example of writing, there's 72.3% of our students are in that range, and then only 11.3 are in the 600 to 800 range. So I just thought that was something that the schools wanted, so I thought you would be interested in as well.
Are there questions on the SAT report? Mrs. Bright?
Looking, I know that you've wrapped in the non-public schools in the Maryland All and Nation All. Do you have a breakout of how we compare directly to non-public instead of having it wrapped in to another number? Are local non-public schools doing the same, better, worse?
We don't have access to the local non-public
They don't
numbers.
break those out?
No, they do not. And they only started breaking the public school scores when you look at the slide. They only started doing that 3 years ago, that they started breaking them out. So they publish Maryland Public and Maryland All, but they don't publish Washington County Public and All.
And one of the things that I think Dr. Wilcox mentioned a few minutes ago, there's a difference between your last take scores and your best take scores.
Right.
And, you know, our best take is obviously higher than our last take, but this is what everybody goes by. This keeps everybody on a level playing field, everybody meaning public schools. If you're a private school and you're advertising for students, I suspect you put your best scores out there because there's nothing saying you can't.
You knew where I was going with
Yes.
the question. Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions or comments?
Do we have, I'm sorry, do we have access within Washington County to the best scores for our students? In other words, you know, you have the last take up there, which comes from, obviously, do we have access to that? Could we get, I mean, if you guys wanted to put that out as a...
And principals do look at that.
They do, okay. And they have access and see how each student, good. Thank you.
Anything else?
Well, the only thing I would say, Justin, or Dr. Harding, is this, is that, you know, one of the interesting things when we start to do comparisons between the education that kids pay for at some of the private schools and what we offer our kids is we do look at our college admissions and the universities that our kids are going to. Part of the conversation that's going on with Greater Hagerstown and the county now about funding some scholarships created an opportunity for us to take a look at where our kids are going to college and university. And I will tell you, I think when you look at those kids who have determined from early on in their academic career that they are going to go to a 4-year college or university, our kids are going to some of the most prestigious schools in the country, and I'll share that with the board members at some time in the near future. Our kids who want to go to college and have identified that as a goal early on can go anywhere in the country. You should be very proud of them.
Go ahead. Well, I was going to say before, I was going to say I'm going to sound like a cheerleader, but I think these results look very good to me, and I'll tell you a couple of reasons why I think so. I mean, we have 7% more test takers this year than we have in previous years, than we did last year, which is a substantial increase. And my hope is that there are a lot of those kids that I call reachers who, you know, maybe I'll go to college, maybe I won't go to college, I'll take the SAT and, you know, we'll take it from there. And to see our average score essentially remain flat as there are so many more kids now taking the test and thinking about whether college is something that's right for them, that to me says very good things. The second thing is, and you all know I don't like to cherry pick data, but if I look at the math scores, and I don't think this is cherry picking because it's a trend that goes back 8 years. Our mean SAT score in math is higher than Maryland Public, Nation Public, and All Maryland, and it's almost the same as Nation All. Now, that says we're doing great things in our math department, and we have been for a long period of time. And I just wanted to point that out in case somebody watching or the public didn't catch it, and also to congratulate the math department. I mean, that shows a sustained high quality of instruction and learning over a long period of time, at least as measured by this metric. And I think I just wanted to point that out. So congratulations again to the staff and the math department and all the teachers out there who are the ones who are actually doing the work to help the kids get to that point.
One just short. I know in the past, and I think we still mandate a PSAT for all of our students in 9th grade. Is that accurate? 10. I know at one point there was a concern about students scoring significantly high scores on the PSAT and deciding not to take the SAT. have we been able to convert that, turn that around? What are we doing to go after some of those
Oh, that's the
high
favorite
flyers
hobby
on
of
the
most
PS?
high school principals, is chasing those kids down
Yeah.
and getting them to take the SAT. But that's just an ongoing thing. I mean, you're dealing with individuals, obviously, that have their own thoughts and ideas, but certainly we address them and we encourage them and we encourage their parents. But we certainly track that. I mean, we look at the PSAT, we look at how kids scored, look at the ones that really should be taking the SAT, and we certainly reach out to all of them and ask them to do that.
Is it improving? Are we seeing improvement in that?
I think this year we had 2 schools who missed their targets of the 7 comprehensive high schools, is that correct?
Yes.
But we have very specific metrics that we track. We're on it.
We still, does HCC require SAT? I know for a long time they did not, and that was a problem for us. We could not get some kids, I mean, they had the mindset, this is where I'm going to go for 2 years, so why waste the money, why waste the time?
Well,
Consequently, you know.
Kids
it
going
was a
there
problem.
know they're going to face another admission test, which is the AccuPlacer,
Yeah.
before they take classes. So a lot of the kids will say, if I'm going there, and we have almost 700 kids out of our graduating class last year that went to HCC. It's a
Right.
substantial number of our
Right.
kids. So if they have the mindset that I'm not going to take the SAT, it's pretty hard to convince them not
It
to.
is.
But
It was and has been for a long, 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 long time.
I will say that we do let them know that one benefit is if they score at least a 550 in a particular area, they can skip the AccuPlacer. But the ones who feel like I'm a 510, I'm a 520, and that's a long day on a Saturday if they know for a fact they're going to HCC. But when we can show them their PSAT and say, you won't have to take the AccuPlacer, we still make that argument.
what are you doing Saturday morning? Are you taking it again?
Oh, yeah.
I was just going to say. My daughter is probably studying right now. Well, no, she's still in class. But she could still be studying. So, yeah.
Let's hope they're one and the same.
Yeah. That was a
Anything
message
else
to
from
Morgan.
anybody? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is personnel action.
This is the 3rd time the personnel crew has been in here today, so thank you. All right.
Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, members of the board, there are several personnel actions for your review this afternoon.
Is there a motion to approve the personnel actions recommended by staff? Thank you, Mrs. Brighton. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor of the personnel actions recommended by staff? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 6-0, and the student member abstains. Thank you.
Can I have my...
You may stay right here and have your
Absolutely
team
may.
join. Would you make sure they're all properly introduced?
I
Laura? Thank
certainly
you.
will. We are here this afternoon to present the annual Human Resources Update to the Board of Education, and this report will review activities from the previous school year as well as what we've done in terms of hiring for 13-14. I have with me 3 HR coordinators, Lindsay Darr, who works with teacher certification, Terry Baker on the end, ESP, A&S, and employee relations, and Joni Burkhart, who works with teacher evaluation and performance management. We're going to walk you through the employee life cycle, really, from recruitment and hiring to retention and then separation from service, and show you some data from this past year as well as the upcoming year. We attended 8 recruiting fairs. Well, we did not personally attend, I should say. We staffed 8 recruiting fairs with 19 of our staff, supervisors, principals, assistant principals, to screen and recruit potential candidates for teaching. We had 387 candidates that were either screened in an interview process or provided us with their information or an application. And as a result of that, we had 22 new hires out of those 8 fairs. The fairs take place Maryland, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, a variety of universities and fairs that set up and we attend. As far as our new teachers hired for this school year, we have 144 new teachers. The last year that was higher than that was school year 9-10, and then it took a little dip, and it's back up this school year to 144. This chart shows you where the teachers are placed in terms of level. So the most number being placed in elementary, middle, and then the second highest number being placed in high schools. Other school placements include the Family Center, Antietam Academy. Trends in teacher placement over the years, where teachers have been placed, new teachers, elementary, middle, and high. The elementary placements are decreasing a little bit, and the high school placements are increasing a little bit. The middle school is holding fairly steady. The experience level of new teachers, as you would expect, there are a lot of teachers that are right out of school, so the highest percentage is in the new, less than 1 year of experience. And then the 1 to 5 and greater than 5 year figures are fairly even. We have new teachers complete a new teacher profile when they start with us, so we get a lot of kind of baseline data, so we know where they're coming from in terms of whether or not they went to Washington County Public Schools, whether they attended HCC, whether they student taught for us or subbed for us. So we show you that data. And then we also do a new teacher survey, and that was conducted late last month, which was yesterday. Of the 144 new teachers, 98 responded to our survey. So we have some data from that as well. We know that of the 144 new teachers, over half of them were hired from local schools and universities. And here's a breakdown. The most from Frostburg, and we have a partnership relationship with that university, so that makes sense. And some other schools that new teachers were hired locally. Gender information is always interesting. Far more females at the elementary level, and then it evens out slightly as you get into middle and high school, but still predominantly female. As part of what's required by COMAR, we conduct a new teacher induction program. So COMAR states that we have to have a comprehensive new teacher induction program. It's up to the district to decide what components they want to include in that. And these are some of the things that we include. The New Teacher Academy, which I know you all know about, is 3 days of intensive training from a variety of sources. Year-round support from lead teachers, classroom visitations, Title II funded peer support, and various workshops and training. So these are things that happen throughout the year, as well as that big push at the beginning of the year. From our new teacher survey, we asked some questions about their hiring experience and what they found as they were brought on board and their expectations of the district. Generally, there are very high ratings. Most strongly agree that they were given a high-quality interview, that their benefits were clearly explained, that they had easy access to human resources for any questions they might have, and that they had quick access to email, which seems a little odd, but it's very, very important to have that immediate access the first day you come to work, to have an email address, because that is largely how they get all information. Receiving an accurate sense of Washington County Public Schools is the lowest rating, but it's still right around the 4 level of agree. As far as teacher retention, we also do a second survey where we randomly sample our entire pool of teachers who have worked 5 or more years and pick 300 every year to receive this teacher retention survey. And of the 300 that we sent out, we had 210 responses. And salary was rated by far the highest reason for continuing employment. And that could possibly be interpreted several ways. They need the money, so they can't leave, or it's a good salary, and so they're not leaving.
Yes, I like that.
Okay. And there are other reasons there that you can see. And the full surveys and some additional data was included as an addendum in your packets. Other pieces of information regarding the teacher retention survey, we asked them generally how satisfied they are with Washington County Public Schools. And by far, extremely satisfied and satisfied are the highest ratings. There's a 26% in the neither category and 7% dissatisfied. We also work in terms of retention with ongoing professional development and professional learning opportunities. So we make sure that there are trainings and partnerships and different things that teachers can access to help encourage them to stay working with Washington County Public Schools. And I won't read all of those to you, but there's a good array of information there. And then we talk about teacher turnover. And so this is from 2012, 2013. You've seen these numbers in previous meetings. We had 119 teachers separate from service through September 25th. We had to cut it off at some point to give you this report. They break down by resignations, retirements, and non-renewals. And the next piece of data shows you how that looks compared to the last 2 school years. There have been slight upticks in all of the categories. So there are more resignations, more retirements, and more non-renewals. There are a few more people leaving this year than the previous year. In terms of teacher turnover, years of service, it's pretty widely distributed. A lot of years of experience, 31 and higher, and the 6 to 10 year chunk is 25% as well. The 1 to 5 years of experience at 22% does include those teachers whose contracts were non-renewed. The next page we talk about why teachers are telling us they leave. Again, this is a survey that people take. So of the 119 teachers separating from service, we had 98 complete the survey. To me, it's clear from this data that a lot of teachers who retired completed this survey because that's the highest percentage indicated here. But you see other reasons: workload, commute, all the way down to changing careers completely at 5%. Salary and benefits and professional development are both items that we ask about, but both receive less than 2% response. So those are not reasons why people are leaving. In terms of future action from the Human Resources Department, and I have these women sitting with me so that you can ask questions afterwards because they are truly the experts. But in terms of recruitment, we do have some efforts underway. We are redesigning our HR website, both to be an attractor and a piece for marketing the district to potential candidates, but also to be more user-friendly and provide better information for our current employees. We're developing new recruiting materials so that when we go to recruiting fairs and send people to recruiting fairs, Washington County Public Schools catches people's eyes and is an attractive booth for the candidates to approach. And we're also implementing a full-service electronic e-recruiting system that will be very much streamlined and much more user-friendly than what we have in place now, and will really allow a lot more interaction between candidates and human resources during the whole process from application to hire. As far as retention goes, we're again continuing ongoing trainings. Joni's conducting trainings on the Teachscape system to teachers and principals, and we're providing training and education on the whole observation and evaluation process. Again, improving the website will help because people will have easier access to information that they need. Forms, documents, negotiated agreements, whatever it is they might want to access will be very easy to find. And we're really working on ongoing problem solving and collaboration and communication between human resources and the district in general and the employee associations. And then in terms of separation from service, of course we don't want people to leave, but when they do, we're conducting exit interviews that have always been done, but we've added, as you know, this in-person element so that people can request an in-person interview. We can gather some more data and hopefully dig a little deeper into what the reasons are for separation of service. And we'll be doing that for not only teachers, but A&S as well. So we can look at different reasons why people are leaving. You did also receive an addendum to the presentation that does include data on our ESP hires and applications for the year, as well as our administrative and supervisory moves and hires for the year. You'll note that there is a place on your table for A&S position information that talks about principals moving from acting status. Principals placed as acting principal occurs because there's some sort of emergency situation. It occurs mid-year, someone has left, something has happened, and there is a spot that needs to be filled. We can't leave a school without a principal. So that person would be placed in an acting position until either the position is filled and that person moves on, or that person ends up actually being hired for that position and becomes the regular principal. Okay. So what questions can we answer for you?
Mrs. Williams?
My question is with regard to the new teacher induction program. I'd like to know a little more about the Title II funded peer support. I know at one time we had mentor teachers through CP3, and we no longer have CP3, and to my knowledge, we no longer have mentor teachers. So you've got a plan, and apparently it's this peer support.
We do. In fact, we do have 51 lead teachers in position. Everybody at the school who is at a school where there is a lead teacher also offers mentoring support as part of their job as a lead teacher. So it's basically a job that is split between professional development of all teachers, experienced and new teachers, and also mentoring services. Once a month, right now it's twice a month, in September and October, we devote some time to training on coaching, mentoring, how to have difficult conversations, how to move teachers forward, listening, and that is one part of the new teacher induction. We also have for peer support, there's a part that is workshops, and that's when we bring somebody in and use lead teachers, we use master teachers, we use other teachers, anybody like that who can support those teachers through workshops. Also for peer support, what we offer is these teachers, we have certain buildings that have a higher number of teachers, newer teachers, non-tenured teachers at each building. So those buildings who have a higher number, we offer peer support, and sometimes sometimes at the building level, they know what they need for that certain building. They come together, they develop a plan, everybody has to have a plan, and an evaluation, how is it working, and we ask those teachers to come in, and they're paid workshop pay, and usually, a lot of times the lead teacher leads that, and the principals, the assistant principals are a part of that, the principals are a part of that, and it really helps, sometimes that environment of helping each other through these tough times, that you're not out there alone, especially when you're at a building that has 10 to 11 new teachers, is very helpful.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Mr. Bailey?
President Hardings has been complimentary to our math teachers and our math program for the scores that we saw a minute ago. At one time, we had what we called reduction in force in the system, RIF, RIFs. And because of the RIFs, people who were not certified in mathematics received a full mathematics teaching assignment at the middle school level. I hope we're avoiding that now, and we have math specialists teaching math in middle and high school. Is that, can you verify that?
Yes, all of our math positions this year were filled by highly qualified teachers, which means that they hold certification and have passed the appropriate praxis test in the area that they're teaching. So at the middle school level, it could be they're certified in math 7 through 12, which also covers 6th grade because our middle schools are subject specific, or it may be an elementary candidate that had taken the middle school math praxis test and added that to their certification, so they're highly qualified to teach middle school math in that case. As far as the other certification areas go, we have made a practice not to hire conditionally certified teachers. We have had enough qualified candidates in the past couple of years, except for our areas like Washington County Technical High School, where you're bringing in someone from the trade, and generally you are hiring a conditional person, for example, electrical construction or one of the automotive areas. They have the experience, and then they need to obtain the education coursework.
I'm very pleased with the answer. Just in looking at numbers and rounding them a little bit, tuition reimbursement, around $650,000 in tuition reimbursement. That's for the last school year.
Yes, for 12-13.
Yeah. Is that basically for to move up to another degree or recertification purpose, or both?
It's for both. Our teachers in Maryland are required to earn their master's degree or their master's equivalency within 10 years of obtaining a certificate. So the majority of that reimbursement is for those teachers who are working towards that goal. For the master's degree, or for the equivalency, you have to have 21 graduate credits. So we are reimbursing them for that coursework. We also do reimburse our occupational therapists, physical therapists, and speech-language pathologists for their licensure each year. And that comes from the tuition reimbursement budget as well.
And there is a dollar figure set on
Yes.
credit,
Yes.
$150 per credit or $200 per credit?
Our teachers can receive, it's $317 per credit, and they can receive a maximum reimbursement of 9 credits per year. That $317 per credit, if it's a 3-credit class, that's $951, and that is very close to the tuition rate for an in-state person, graduate student at Frostburg.
Thank you very much. The information here is very good. I don't think I've, in a good number of years, have seen it so well put together.
Thank you.
Are there other questions, Mrs.
Yeah.
Williams?
Thank you very much for including a copy of the survey so that we could see what's being asked. And I was wondering, with regard to the comments, is it possible for the board to see the anecdotal comments from these surveys? Is that?
I think we could pull a selection. We need to make sure they're clear of any kind of identifying information.
Right. I'm looking at this one that said, did any school or district policies or procedures make your job more difficult?
Sure.
That's the kind of information that would be helpful to me as a board member. So I'm just, as I look through here and I see those open-ended questions, I just appreciate having that information.
I don't see a problem with that as long as it couldn't somehow be
remain
pinned to
confidential.
one person.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I understand.
Are there other questions, Mrs. Brightman?
On new teachers entering the system, what level of technology savvy are you seeing with new teachers coming to us straight from college? Let's sort of limit it to that.
I'm going to let Joni answer that because she works directly with them.
I think that they understand technology very well. They're used to it. They are digital natives. They don't think twice about picking something up and trying something out. There's no, they have no apprehension about how does this work or anything like that. I do think that all teachers, whether you're new or experienced, the question is how do you use technology best in a classroom? So taking that technology that you're used to using and now integrating it with students so that it becomes a tool to learn more, to be more, to become more as a teacher and with your students in order to enhance performance.
Would there be a benefit to infecting our more veteran teachers with that energy, technologically savvy energy that we see from newer teachers when we talk about mentoring or coaching or whatever? Are we using some of that energy, or is it more of a top-down rather than a collegial type of sharing of knowledge?
No, you go ahead. I was going to talk about Framework for Teaching, which a lot of teachers, veteran, new, and in between, are going to be using this year and did use last year, and that's a web-driven application. And so just looking at that and how that works and how that integrates with what they're doing, though that isn't something they're using with their students, that's something that they're becoming familiar with. I'm not out there in the classrooms necessarily, but I don't sense as much reluctance with technology as you might think. I could be wrong. Joni, what do you think?
I think it's individually. I think everybody is learning how to use technology well. And part of that is our new teachers do have a lot to offer, and there are many staffs who value whenever new teachers come in and they have that excitement and they have that experience and you can learn from each other. It really sets up a good atmosphere that your experienced teachers have so much to offer new teachers, and your new teachers
That
have
exchange,
so much to
and
offer
that's what I was
experienced
wondering,
teachers.
if we
And
had
that's-
that sort of collaborative
we are trying to
team.
develop that culture, and I think it's working at many of our schools.
To your knowledge, as far as content, new teachers coming to us straight from college, how many hours in content do they come to us with? Or is it still more about general education philosophy rather than specific content?
Well, when you're looking at the secondary level, to give you an example, if someone was not traditionally prepared and would like to go to the State Department and request certification and receive an evaluation, there is a requirement of 24 to 30 credits in the content area specifically, and then education coursework. So when we're looking at our programs that are coming, teachers coming with a preparation program, a whole bachelor's degree, Master of Arts in Teaching, their content level is mirroring that credit.
So 24 to
24
30.
to 30 credits in general.
That's more than I thought it would be. I assume that's an increase over past
As far as the
graduates.
content,
Mhm.
yes.
The substitute teaching experience, it looks like 40% of our new teachers had that experience coming in. So that seems to be a pretty interesting pipeline to our classrooms. How are we improving that experience? What kind of support are we giving our substitutes? Classroom management, professional development, evaluations?
All of the above.
All of the above.
Are now required, all new substitutes are required to attend a training that includes everything you just mentioned, and then a few other things, school safety.
Verbal de-escalation.
Right,
We have
right.
our student services folks coming in for an hour-long training on verbal de-escalation.
And we also required our current subs from years past to attend one of, 6 trainings this summer in order to continue to substitute in the system. Because we just felt like it perhaps hadn't been caught up lately, and we wanted everyone to have the same training with new information. So I would say it's a pretty comprehensive training for substitutes. And they get a lot of support when they walk in the door from school secretaries and the principal.
And the new evaluation
Yes.
form that
Yes,
you
they-
shared with
yeah.
us in the HR committee.
They receive that at their training as well.
Final question, I know that we talk about exit interviews. How about the concept of stay interviews? How could we see that happening?
I think we really need to dig into the data that we got, and because of the timing of this report, I'll be honest with you, we just closed the surveys last week. So we really need to dig down into the data and look at what it's telling us. With that teacher retention survey, I think there's probably a lot of information to be analyzed in terms of what might be lacking, what might be red flags that we could look at, and where we need to focus and pay attention.
Thank you.
Just one quick one. On the teacher years of service on the pie graph that you showed us.
Okay.
31 plus years, 20%. Those are teachers. That's probably right around 360 teachers in that category. Is that a pretty standard number, or is that a high number that are going to be very soon eligible for retirement?
Well, actually, that chart referred to those that left this previous year, that completed the exit interview survey.
Okay.
So that isn't our total teacher population, although we could certainly get that for you.
That would be an interesting number
Okay.
to see.
Sure. Benefits supervisor Gina Keller recently prepared some information regarding kind of potential retirement numbers that we could look at.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I should have read the exit
No, that's
interview
okay.
data.
Are there other questions from other members? I just have two. The first is, what areas for professional staff are we finding it difficult to hire? Is it still the standard ones that you'd expect, higher level mathematics,
Foreign
some of the
language,
sciences?
Spanish, French. the sciences, physics, chemistry, and this year we had just a large number of English openings, so we were having some difficulty filling some of our English positions because it seemed that shortage did not seem to be only for Washington County. It felt as if there may have been a trend in that English teachers were having their pick at positions across the region.
Great, thank you. And for the ESP, what are the areas that we're having, or that we have started to see it become more difficult to hire, if any?
Mostly our technical areas, but bus drivers, as you hear from us. If you've seen some of our buses out with some of our banners and so forth, we're pulling out every angle we can to try to recruit new bus drivers, because some days we don't know if we're going to ask Mr. Michaels to drive a bus. It gets slim, but we're surviving right now. We are bringing in new sub-bus drivers. We do offer the CDL trainings free through the school system, so it's just a matter of bringing in the right people to fill those positions.
Great. Any other questions? Any board members?
Just a comment, you're missing one of your team members, Mr. Chick.
Yes.
So David, I'm sure adds to this.
Yes, he does.
I just want to say to the board members, you know, Terry has been here for a number of years, and she's just a tremendous asset to the organization. Adding, I think, Joni to the team has deepened and enriched the team in terms of professional development. Of course, you all, I think, regard Laura very highly in terms of the professionalism and expertise she's brought. Lindsay was somebody who, honestly, up until about 6 months ago, I knew was working here in the building, but I didn't know what a rock star she was. I mean, and I want to say that sincerely. There probably is not anyone within this organization who understands our needs in terms of teachers, the certification rules, and is more of service than Lindsay. So a great team has been developed, and when you have an opportunity to have David in front of you as well, I think you're going to see that we have a 21st century human resources team, something that this board has asked for. It's not to besmirch anyone who's been here before, it's simply to say this team's going to take it to a new level, as I think you're saying. So thank you to each and every one of you, and to the rock star.
Thank you all. Board member committee reports is next. Mrs. Harshman, curriculum.
Curriculum and instruction has not met since our last board meeting, but we will be meeting October 22nd at 12:45 in the board conference room. The agenda will be posted online.
Thank you, Mrs. Harshman. Mr. Bailey.
Finance Committee met on September the 24th. Three major items on the agenda. We discussed the status of the annual financial audit, which you had a presentation on today. We also heard updates on the legislative audit and the progress being made there to eliminate some of the questions that arose from that particular audit. And the goal, one of the goals that the finance department is working on, got an update on their progress in moving forward with the software in that program. Thank you.
Mrs. Brightman, facilities.
Facilities met on September 24th. We toured the new redesigned area of Western Heights. Excellent, very light. It's hard to even think you're in a basement or lower area. Very light, high ceilings, very functional, good use of instructional space. Science, art labs, as well as the virtual high school is located down there, and I think it's an excellent way of reusing that space. So kudos to the facilities staff department for that. Bester is on schedule. West City, we should be looking at the design documents on the October 19th meeting. I think they're going to be coming forward, unless that date is changed. We heard about the Van Leer Manor, Section 17, which is a development that may be coming active again. and had an update on Pangbourne, which many of you recall we redistricted to try to help help with some of the overcrowding there. I believe the enrollment, I don't know if it's accurate because this was a week ago, but it was at 786. So it's helped somewhat, and staff said that the school team is feeling much better about their capacity. Our next meeting is October 22nd, and we'll be meeting at Bester at 10:15.
Thank you,
Excuse me. Oh, the construction trailer at Bester. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Mr. Ridenhour, HR?
Yes, I'm not sure the exact date, but we met, it was fourth Tuesday.
24th.
24th, thank you.
Same day.
We did talk about, we did have a discussion, and I think there is a policy on electronic signatures that will be going to the policy committee. We got an update on some coaching regulations that Dr. Wilcox will be implementing, and we will be meeting again the fourth Tuesday of this month, which is 22nd.
Thank you, Mr.
Calendar next week.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Mrs. Fisher asked me to fill in for. The policy committee has not met since our last meeting. We're scheduled to meet on October the 8th, which is next Tuesday. Continue to have a full schedule of policies to work through. Mr. Grunendijk, anything from student government?
Student government has not met since the last meeting. We will be meeting on Tuesday, October 15th at Washington County Technical High School.
Great. Tuesday, October 15th. Okay, great. And from MABE conference planning, I know this is the big week, so is there anything to report?
Well, we met on the 24th of October, and we prepared materials. We stuffed participant bags full of great things, and we're looking forward to a super conference that starts tomorrow. Registration begins tomorrow and this conference will run through Friday, so
great.
We're excited.
I look forward to attending. And Mrs. Brightman, anything from?
Nothing to report, but I'm sure we'll have plenty to bring back to this board after the state conference.
Future agenda items we're going to have on November 5th. We'll have our update on enrollment and our farm numbers for the current school year. Additionally, on the 15th, we're going to have a miscellaneous business item following up on our discussion of state discipline regulations. Dr. Wilcox will bring back the request that we had about approximately what he thinks the cost would be to Washington County. And at that point, the board will be able to make a determination if we want to take a position. We'll still have at that point 15 days in the public comment period for the state board. So we'll have that discussion on October 15th. We also confirmed with the delegation that we'll be meeting on December 3rd at 10 o'clock at Hagerstown Community College. That's the day that they've sort of set aside for all of their community and constituent meetings before the legislative session. So that'll be on December 3rd. Board member comments. Mr. Ridenhour?
Nothing at this time.
Mrs. Brightman?
No, thank you.
I have nothing.
Mrs. Williams?
Nothing at this time.
Mrs. Harden?
Nothing.
Mr. Grunendijk?
I have one I just can't resist. I'm not a board member, can I?
You talk as long as you want.
So today we went live with the parent portal, which gives people access to see Synergy. And at 2:26, I got an email from a parent who said, "Thank you," with 5 asterisks behind it. "Absolutely love the detail this provides. Now I can ask my son about certain grades that he received with assignments done at school. Not all assignments are given as homework, so now I can see everything that he is receiving a grade on. Great job, WCPS." 5 asterisks and a smiley face. So, given that it went live today and parents are already using it, that's a very good thing for the system. I want to say thank you to the board members because it was your wisdom that allowed us to purchase this new system. So, thank you. I won't tell you about the other ones that are coming, but that one was really good.
I'll back that up too. I haven't been, I don't know if it's live at my child's school yet or not, but I can tell you on back to school night there was a palpable buzz about this new parent access to student grades. I think all the teachers said, "It's going live October 1st, it's going live October 1st, and I promptly came back and said, "Dr. Wilcox, it better go live October 1st or you're going to have a problem." But I know there's a lot of excitement about it, and I look forward to accessing it myself.
Yeah, so we are live at the high schools and middle schools. Elementary schools are coming. By November 1, they'll all be live, but some are actually live already because they were just ahead of the game a little bit. But we do think it's important that our teachers have plenty of professional development around the access to the system and use of the system. So that's the one thing that's holding us up a little bit right now.
If I, Dr. Hardings, one sec, there was an interesting report on the news this morning. I thought it was kind of humorous, and it made me think that we are probably going to have to go out and hire, you know, how do they say it, my geek's smarter than your geek. There was an art, California has started a one-on-one iPad initiative, and they have spent considerable money and time trying to put up barriers so that students can't get around in some areas. Well, apparently, the student geeks are better than their geeks. 500 iPads were confiscated because they hacked the system to get around everything. So we are going to have to be very good at what we do because those kids already are very good. I think we need Abby or Tim McGee from NCIS.
There you go. Well, make no mistake, our geeks are second to none. All right? I feel confident in saying that.
Ooh.
That's right. Great geeks.
On that note, we've reached the end of the agenda. I'll declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all.
I was waiting for you to say sincerely, Justin Hardings.
I'm going to talk.
I know.